This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Taluki, and on today's episode, we are talking all about the Detroit Lions draft coming up on Thursday in Las Vegas, the second overall pick in this year's draft, and the 32nd via trade from the Los Angeles Rams, part of the Matthew Stafford deal last season. Joining us a little bit later in the program is my friend Nate Leopold, who wants to be an NFL scout one day. He was a four-year player for John Carroll's football team. As you guys all know who listen, I've talked a lot about John Carroll football. So he's played all 4 years, and he's about to graduate as well and wants to be an NFL scout. He's made a whole draft book and everything as well. And I want to get his take on some of these Lions players that, these picks in the draft that the Lions might take at 2 and 32. I want to focus more on the first round for this one. And then next week, we can kind of analyze what happened exactly with the Lions and what they took in the entire draft. But I apologize for not having an episode last week. I was a little bit busy. I had a lot of things going on. I know I've talked to you guys about my busy schedule before, but unfortunately it just could not work out. But it was nice to get a little bit of a break as we prepare for the big draft on Thursday through Saturday. But before we get to the draft, I do have to talk a little bit about Miguel Cabrera. And, we talked about it a while ago on the podcast. We gave a whole Tigers preview. I don't want to get into a whole lot of Tigers stuff today just because of the draft. But Miguel Cabrera doing something that has only been seen 7 times in baseball history. 3,000 hits and 500 home runs. Remember last year, that 500 home run chase was happening at the end of the season. Now the focus shifted towards the 3,000 hits. And Miggy, it's funny because he was supposed to play on Friday against the Rockies, and the game ended up getting rained out, and so it had to be moved to the doubleheader on Saturday. And it was really, really cool to see. I was actually working one of our games here at John Carroll when somebody actually notified me that the occurrence, the feed occurred, and I kept watching the replay about 20 times, and I was just taking it all in. And Miggy's single through the right side. And number 3,000. You could see the umpires were switching out the balls as well just before his at-bat. So special balls in play for his 3,000th hit if it were to happen. And it sure enough did. And you know what? The first person that came up to him was Jose Iglesias. Remember, former Tiger, great shortstop, kind of in his dwindling years now with the Rockies. But he was embraced by him immediately. And I just thought it was very classy that Rockies players congratulated him, and then the Tigers, all ran out there to celebrate this amazing accomplishment. And I understand some of the controversies with Miggy off the field. We've talked about some of them before, but you cannot deny what his impact has been on the game of baseball and the city of Detroit. I mean, this is a guy that he came in as a free agent in 2008, and this was just after the Tigers had went to the World Series, and being able to acquire a big bat like that, and then he really became Miguel Cabrera in 2011. I would say that was kind of the turning point for him in his career. Then he had the Triple Crown, got back-to-back MVPs. Tigers were going to the World Series. But he's the only player left on that team from those glory years, as I call it, in the early 2010s. And being able to see him get that was an absolutely amazing accomplishment. And you could see every single fan was standing on their feet, and it was basically sold out almost. And how many people wanted to witness that, including Matthew Stafford, as you guys know, my favorite Detroit Lion of all time. He was there in the Ilitch Suite, the owners of the Tigers, as he was watching with his wife Kelly, and he embraced Miggy after the game as well. So just wanted to talk a little bit about Miggy, give him his due for getting 3,000 hits for his career, and we'll see how much more he can tally up, because the closest player that I think has a chance at 3,000 is probably Jose Altuve, and he's at 1,700 right now. I think the next closest is 2,600 active right now, and that is Robinson Cano. But I don't know if Robinson Cano can get 400 more hits to get to 3,000. He'd have to play a couple more years, and I don't know how much longer Robbie Cano has left. So he's the closest after Miggy. So in my opinion, we're not going to see this for a long time. It's probably going to be another decade or so, and that's even if a player like Altuve gets to 3,000 hits. So I want to close the book a little bit on Miggy. Congratulations again to number 3,000, and it was really, really good to see that. And I know the city of Detroit loved it too. That is for sure, especially in front of the home fans at Comerica Park. All right, folks, it is time to hit the gridiron and the NFL draft coming up Thursday in Las Vegas. I went last year in Cleveland, and it was a really, really incredible scene as well. I got my cousin going over to Vegas, actually, who lives in Denver. He's actually going to the draft for the first time ever. And so shout out to my cousin Jake, who's going to be going and see it in person himself on Thursday. But I want to welcome in now. This is a live interview. Remember, most of our interviews are done via Zoom call, but I was able to get Nate in the studio here. And, 4-year player at John Carroll, wants to be an NFL scout, and is very eager to talk about a lot of these players that the Lions could potentially take at 2-32 on Thursday. Nate, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. No, I'm really excited to be here. I know we've been talking all week about how excited we are for this discussion. I love talking all things NFL draft, and I think the Lions have a really unique and interesting case for this draft of what are they going to do, because it really is going to lay the foundation for what they do moving forward.
Now, Nate, I know you love the Steelers. That's your team. You're a Pittsburgh guy. He's from Pittsburgh, but he definitely has done his fair share of research on every single team in the National Football League. But before we start getting into some players, I want to know a little bit more about you, Nate, and for the audience at home. Why exactly did you want to go into scouting in the first place in the NFL?
What I find really interesting about scouting is obviously everyone loves the player evaluation process, watching players, grading, giving your opinion on players. But really, it's that next step of how they all fit together. How do the players fit together with who's on the roster, with the way the NFL is going, with the current coaching staff and their schemes. Making all of those pieces fit together along with then the NFL free agency and getting them all to fit to create this championship team. I think that's really, really cool, and that's really why I want to do that.
I want to know, too, because we've had a lot of ex-players on before on the podcast, ex-Detroit Lions. We've had a couple of ex-coaches as well, but we've never had a scout or somebody that wants to go into scouting. So I want to know, what are some things that these scouts are looking for, not only with the Lions but across the league, at certain players, and what exactly are they trying to look for to make their team successful, I guess?
Well, the film's always going to be the first and the most important evaluation. That's always going to be, that's what you're doing on the field. That's the most important. That's always going to be most important. But as the NFL has gotten faster and bigger, the traits and the athleticism testing and measurables, that's really becoming a bigger part of the scouting process. And this is the analytics that a lot of people refer to. How all of that fits together. Someone actually created a website called ras.football.com, and it measures your raw athleticism score. So it'll give you a number out of 10 of how athletic you are based off of your testing numbers, your measurables, and your overall size. It's sort of a composite grade. It's a really interesting, fascinating tool that I've done some research on of how NFL players in the past have hit these certain thresholds. So it's really a combination of the film, the measurables, your overall athleticism, and then obviously how you are in your player interviews, which obviously the general public does not have access to, but that's a part of the process for a lot of NFL teams.
Now, I want to know, you talked a lot about those measurables as well, and we all know, speed is everything in the NFL, and everyone measures your speed, based on the 40 time, how strong you are with the bench press, those cone drills and everything like that. But I just want to know, how important are those measurables compared to what's on film? Because, we've heard stories before of guys like Jerry Rice who ran a 4.7 40, but is playing absolutely lights out, even though he was a small competition at Mississippi Valley State, still able to become probably arguably the greatest player of all time. But then there's also stories of, the name escapes me, but a player from the Eagles maybe 20 years ago from Boston College who basically all he did was train just to get these tests, and he ended up becoming a first-round pick, but they overlooked the fact that he wasn't a very good football player in general. So there's kind of like two ends of the spectrum here. I just want to know, like, what is your thoughts on these measurables and how much they can play into, what's actually the product on the field?
So when you watch, you're going to watch the film first. You have to do. You have to watch how he plays as a player. And you're going to give him an athleticism grade based off what you see on film, so how athletic he is as a football player. And then you will get all the testing, and you will see how does that stack up with how I saw him athletically on the field. Now, if it matches up, like, okay, I thought this guy was really explosive, and he has a good explosive grade when he tests, then okay, checks off, move on. He checks the athleticism trait. There are some guys that they look really athletic on the field, and then they test poorly. So they have to go back to the film and look, okay, is there something I missed in terms of his athleticism grade? Or did he just test poorly, and what was the reason he tested poorly? For example, Kyle Hamilton, people were shocked when he ran like a 4.6 40. But then if you took a video, if you watch the video of his 40 time, he was zigzagging. He didn't run in a straight line. If he runs in a straight line, he probably runs a lot better time. The perspective is different. So it's stuff like that you have to go back and cross-reference. Okay, is that what I saw on film? And why or why not did I have that opinion? So you have to, when the testing's just there as an extra tool, that shouldn't be the end-all, be-all, but it's another tool for the evaluation process.
What are some things that, I know it varies per position, but what are just some things in general that scouts are looking for on film for these guys?
So on film, it'll vary by position, obviously. You'll look for, when you're on film, you'll look for traits and you'll look at the technique. It's sort of a twofold thing. Coaches, they're always looking at that technique, how well is his scooch and man coverage, how well are his pass sets as a pass protecting tackle. So that's part of it. That's the part that it can be coached up. So those are seen as these are things that he does on a football field that we can improve as coaches, that we can mold him into what we think he can be. The other part of it is, does he show the traits that can succeed at the next level? For a corner, can he run with the deep ball? How well does he change directions? For a linebacker, how athletic is he moving side to side? It's sort of those athleticism traits, but at the same time, it's the athleticism traits as a football player. As an edge rusher, you're able to turn the corner. Now you have a hoop drills to see how athletic he can do that, but can he do that in a game when a tackle is trying to run him into the ground? So it's that combination of size and speed. So you're really evaluating. Does he have the technique? Does he have the skills? And then does he have the traits as well?
Very, very interesting there from Nate Leopold. Wants to be an NFL scout one day as he's joining us here on Open Mic Night. So I want to get into a little bit more about the actual NFL draft and some of the players in the mix. Of course, the Lions with the number 2 overall pick. Nate, I got to say, this is the first time in a long time, and I've paid attention to the draft for probably the last 10, 15 years. This is the first time that I can remember in a long time that we just don't really know who's going to be in the top 5. Who's going number 1. I'm still looking at mock drafts that were published today. We don't know if it's Aiden Hutchinson, Quay Walker, Thibodeau. Some people think maybe, even like I even saw a cornerback at number 1 and at some mock drafts. Like, why is it that we just still don't know who's going number 1 or even in that top 5 yet? It's crazy.
Yeah, the opinions are split all over the place. I mean, just talking about the Jaguars alone, I read today that the head coach wants somebody, the owner wants someone, and the GM wants somebody else. So, I mean, you've never seen some kind of... I mean, this is crazy what we're seeing right now. There's no consensus. There's no anything, really, for what's to be expected. And really, the only explanation I have for that is this draft lacks the elite top talent. Just based off of my grades alone, Aiden Hutchinson is the only player from this year's draft who would go in my top 9 players from last year.
Wow.
And it's not that these other guys aren't really good football players. It's just that elite talent, the Micah Parsons, the Jamar Chases, and then obviously the quarterbacks from last year. We don't have those in this draft. So it makes that top of that board just... When you don't have these superstar players, it's harder to form a consensus. Everyone knew Jamar Chase was unbelievable. Everyone knew Micah Parsons was unbelievable. Now, he fell because of other reasons, but the talent was no Kyle Pitts. Some of these players are one of one. There's not a second Micah Parsons. There's not a second Kyle Pitts. There aren't guys like that in this draft. So that's really where it's going to create a lack of consensus.
You talked about earlier about how different you've heard different personnel on the Jags want different players. It reminds me a couple years ago, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, how there was rumblings that when the Lions took Jeff Okudah at number 3 in 2020, that Bob Quinn, the old GM, wanted Okudah. Matt Patricia wanted Derek Brown from Auburn, defensive line, and I believe it was the scouts. They all wanted Tua from Alabama as quarterback. So there was like this whole mix of different opinions there, and then basically there was a whole ego thing with Bob Quinn saying, "I want Okudah because I'm in charge," and that's very toxic, and we've talked about it on here before. So how toxic can that be if there's different opinions in the room? Is that maybe a good thing, or is it bad in a way, or is it better if everyone kind of agrees on the same guy?
You want to have different viewpoints in a room, because you don't want a bunch of like-minded people, because if you're not going to see everything. One person can't see everything. He can't understand everything. So it's better to have all those multiple viewpoints, because maybe he sees it from a different perspective, brings a better point, and then we can go that way. But when it comes to making a final decision, you still have to have a structure in place and a culture in place that it's okay. Whatever we end up deciding with, we're all on board with it. And that starts with your leadership. So I don't know too much about this particular situation, but I do know that if you have that type of dysfunction, you're not going to be successful. And that's why your more successful organizations, the Steelers, the Patriots, the Eagles, draft really well. There's a certain hierarchy, and there's a certain culture in those organizations of this is how we do business, this is how it's going to be done. And that's why when draft rolls around, you know exactly what's going to happen.
The definition of that is your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Absolutely.
They're very consistent in their drafting, and it's shown with their Super Bowl trophies and their multiple playoff appearances. And Mike Tomlin not having a losing season at all in 15 plus years as the head coach over there. But I want to talk. I just want to get into it with some of the players. I want to name 3 guys right now, and you guys kind of know my opinion. I've flip-flopped a lot this year, the last couple months. There's some days I'm like, I like Aiden Hutchinson. Other days, I'm totally okay with Kayvon Thibodeau. Or Trayvon Walker even sometimes. I want to start with those guys. Hutchinson, Walker, and Thibodeau, all defensive linemen. Is there a case, that any of these guys, or which guys maybe would help the Lions the best if Jacksonville wasn't there? Don't factor Jacksonville into this. If any of those guys fall, who of those guys do you think would help the Lions schematically the most?
I think there's no doubt, if you look at the Lions roster and their depth chart, that edge rusher is the number one priority for this draft. They have to land someone that can get after the quarterback. You play in a division with Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, and play in the NFC with Tom Brady. You got to be able to get up the quarterback to win football games, and they have nobody right now. So they have to find someone that can rush the passer. You mentioned those 3 guys. I'd even throw in Jermaine Johnson as a 4th guy, put sort of the big 4. Starting off with Hutchinson, if he's there, they run the card up. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, is another step up from those 3 players. He, day one, walks in the NFL, true game wrecker, a guy you have to game plan for. He's 6'6", which, I didn't think he was 6'6" on film. I was kind of shocked that, wow, that's some legit size for an edge rusher. So 6'6", he's got all the athletic measurable traits, but he also has a deep array of moves that he can attack with. He can win with speed. He can win with power. He has counters inside. He has violent hands. He creates knockback in the run game. And then he has that relentless motor. So he really hits the trifecta of a pass rusher of he has the athleticism, he has the pass rush moves, and he has the motor. That's really the big 3 you're looking for in a pass rusher, and he hits all of them. So he's a pretty clean prospect, by far my number 1 prospect in this year's draft. Talking about the other guys now, it gets really, really interesting how you look at them. Kayvon Thibodeau, after his sophomore year, so going into last season, was the number 1 guy. He was absolutely the best pass rusher in the draft. I don't think it was that close. He had a rare speed, bend off the edge. He was rail thin, but he turned the corner with the best of them. And then this year, he bulked up in the offseason, and it sort of tightened up his hips. When you're looking at pass rushers, you have to examine their hip flexibility, their ability to get around that's that bend that everyone talks about. That's your hip flexibility, your ability to turn the corner and get your feet pointed to the quarterback. He sort of lost a little bit of that, and that was his best trait, was his speed and bender on the edge. Now, he still had the speed, but the bend wasn't quite there, but he was still exploding by tackles. He's still a freak athlete. He had a 9.67 raw athleticism score out of 10, so he hits the athletic measurable traits. He can get after the passer. The motor that we were talking about, that isn't there. Snap-to-snap basis, he does not play with the same effort, especially in the run game. Aiden Hutchinson is a three-down complete player in the run game. Pass game doesn't matter. Thibodeau's effort wanes in the run game for sure, and his pass rush plan isn't quite there. Now, he has several speed moves he can win with. There's no counter inside, and for a guy who bulked up a little bit, their power isn't there. So Kayvon Thibodeau is kind of in a weird spot where he has to either commit to being, I'm going to be a power guy, I'm going to keep putting on weight, because he weighed in at 254 at the combine. Ooh. So that's more of that outside backer weight that you're talking about. When those guys are more normally speed. They win with speed. The bigger guys that win with power, Cam Jordan, Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, those guys are much bigger. Cam Jordan's 290, Trey Hendrickson's 275. So he has to really commit. Am I going to be a speed guy? Am I going to be a power rusher? And he just needs to go. But either way, his body right now is not conducive to one way or another.
It's interesting you say that about Thibodeau too, because with the weight, and we know the Lions have struggled a lot with linebackers as well. Do you think there's any chance that maybe say the Lions would draft Thibodeau, is there any chance that we could see him at linebacker at all, or would he just be D-line?
No, he's a D-line.
All the way.
He's an edge all the way. His body, he has the frame to bulk up.
Okay.
So if he plays anything, it would be going up, and if he were to go down, it would be more so getting just his body in the right shape to be a true outside backer, like a T.J. Watt, that type of outside linebacker. Talking Trayvon Walker now. Now you're talking about measuring as one of the best athletes ever to come out of college. And I mean, we're talking ever. 9.98 raw athleticism score out of 100. So that's in about the top 1 or 2% of all time. I mean, someone did a comparison. If he tested as a receiver, he would test as an above-average athleticism receiver, which is just ridiculous. He's 6'5", 272, hits all the athletic measurables. But he did not rush off the edge pretty much at all. Georgia ran a very unique defense. They obviously had all kinds of studs across the board, but he aligned more of a 4-eye position for Georgia last year, which plays inside the tackle, which is considered more of an interior defensive lineman alignment, and it's not really conducive to rushing off the edge. And Georgia ran tons of blitzes and stunts where he was constantly on the moving, and that's more of where his role was as a pass rusher. So his true pass rushing ability, his ability to go beat a tackle, it isn't there, and it's quite possible it's never there. I mean, we're talking about someone that didn't do it at all in college. So that's a major, major projection as a pass rusher. Now, he's unbelievable in the run game. Tremendous violence. Everyone's seen the clip of against Michigan, him just absolutely destroying a puller. He's violent. He's physical. He played interior. He played sometimes nose tackle, and he's an edge defender. He's that good in the run game. So you know what you're going to get in the run game. It's just the pass rush. There is some hip tightness, that flexibility we talked about with turning the edge. I don't know if that's going to be his game. So you're talking about a guy that's going to have some type of projection as a pass rusher.
And another guy I'm really curious about as well, who played on the inside at Georgia, his teammate, Jordan Davis. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a guy that's pushing like 350 almost. This guy runs a 4.76, which is freaky fast for a guy his size at the combine this year. I saw him in a couple games, and I've been texting my uncle a lot because he lives in Atlanta, and he is kind of a Georgia fan now. That I just don't think he can really stay on the field a lot because he just gets gassed all the time. We saw it in the SEC championship against Alabama when I was watching, that he gets gassed. I just don't think he's like a 3-down player, but a lot of other people see otherwise. What's your take of Jordan Davis, and if the Lions can get him? I'm not saying at 2. Maybe if he slides down a little more, is he a guy that's worth taking, or is it a big risk?
So Jordan Davis is a very interesting case study in terms of value in the NFL. He measured as the most athletic defensive lineman of all time. 10 raw athleticism, number 1 of all time for his size and speed. 6'6", 340. And just moves like an absolute freak. I mean, that's ridiculous how athletic he is. And like you said, he did not play. He gets tired really easily. He played about 25 to 30 snaps a game. And when you're talking about drafting round 1, you prefer 3-down players. And another thing that's big talked about in scouting circles is with the NFL, most games come down to that final possession of the game. And that's a passing situation, and you need guys that will help you win those situations. Is Jordan Davis likely that guy? That's the big question. He only had 2.5 sacks, but he does. So when it comes to interior D linemen, I think if you value pushing the pocket, Bill Belichick has always valued guys that push the pocket, then Jordan Davis is going to have value to you as a pass rusher. He can push the pocket. Again, no one's stepping in front of 6'6", 340. He's going to be able to bulldoze his way. He's not going to ever develop pass rush moves. And like you said, the conditioning isn't going to quite be there to be every single down as a player. Now, what makes him so valuable is he completely eliminates the run game. I project him similar to a guy like Vita Vea, where a lot of people hated on the fact that the Bucs took him 12th overall. Right. Vita Vea makes them that you cannot run on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You go into the game knowing we're going to have to throw the ball to win because we cannot block him. There's no one that can move that guy in the middle. So that value of completely eliminating any interior run game, that then makes the offenses more predictable because you know they're going to have to throw the ball. And then as a defensive coordinator, that allows you to then dial up some pressures on them and really get into your pass defenses. So Jordan Davis really changes the dynamic of how you get to play the rest of your defense because he completely eliminates one part of the game. But how much do you value that one part of the game? That's where that question lies.
I think it's going to be interesting. He does have an interesting case. I agree with you, Nate. And especially from the Lions' perspective, they drafted 2 interior guys last year, Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike, and just from my opinion, they didn't. I mean, they flashed a little bit here and there, but they weren't really consistent. As Dan Campbell would say, they're kind of a little bit like babies right now in the NFL. They're not fully grown. They got to grow and mature a little bit more. But I just think that maybe even if they do take Jordan Davis, he would definitely just right away, I think, be an upgrade from those 2 guys. That's for sure. But we'll just have to see if maybe he can, get in maybe a little bit better shape as well. If he can stay on the field a little bit longer. And it kind of reminds me a little bit about Snacks Harrison from a couple years ago that the Lions had. They got in the trade with the Giants. I believe they traded away Golden Tate for him as well. And he was a guy that, limited snaps every game, but when he was in, it was basically you could not run against him. And I think I can kind of see a little bit of a comparison with Snacks from the Lions a couple years ago for you Lions fans listening out there. I want to move out to the outer corners of the defense, defensive backs, and look, I've talked about it on the podcast before. I do not want the Lions drafting any sort of defensive back at number 2 at all. But I have to kind of just kind of analyze and see because they are the Lions. They've made some questionable decisions in the past. I don't like going off of past things especially with new regimes. But I have to. So the big one. Ahmad Sauce Gardner, a local product from Detroit King High School. Derek Stingley, the corner from LSU. And then one that I've seen in some mock drafts for the Lions, Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame. So say the Lions take these guys this high. They just drafted Jeff Okudah a couple years ago, but you have to have a lot of these teams have to have these shutdown corners, especially in today's game. Are any of these guys kind of have that lockdown corner potential there.
So here's what's tough if you're the Lions. If you look at your depth chart, I actually think that the Lions have some solid corners in play. I mean, Jeff Okudah obviously has to be able to stay healthy on the field. You'll see what you get out of him this year. Amani Oriwari, who I loved coming out, has
Penn State
absolutely flourished. And then another guy that was hurt last year, but I think was a fantastic draft pick, was Ifeatu Melifonwu. He's a really, really fluid corner for a guy with that size. Not that that should prevent you from looking at taking a corner that high, but just in terms of your overall roster, you actually have some solid players in that spot. But to talk about those three, what's tough is those three players are number 3, 4, and 5 on my big board. So if you're talking about drafting number 2, taking one of those three players is a good pick in terms of who the player is. Derek Stingley, I have him as corner 1 over Sauce Gardner, but they're about as close as you can have them. Derek Stingley is one of the most fluid athletes that we've seen coming out of college. And everyone knows about what he did in 2019 as a true 18-year-old freshman, just locking down the best corners in the country. He has absolutely fantastic ball skills, getting his head around at the last second every single time. He doesn't hold. He has the speed to run with anybody. He's about as special an athlete and technique-wise as you can have as a corner coming out. Now, the concerns are he's not very strong. He's disinterested in the run game. And he's had those injuries the last couple of years. And the Liz Frank injury, I think that's what his ankle, he had an ankle injury or a Liz Frank injury. I forget which one it was. That's a serious injury for a defensive back. So there's that concern. Sauce Gardner, on the other hand, has done nothing but totally shut down a half the field since he's been at Cincinnati. I mean, the teams didn't even try to throw in his general direction because at the line of scrimmage, he eliminates your routes. He's 6'3", has super long arms, has the speed to run with anybody. He projects similar to how Antonio Cromartie was, where you're not beating him off the ball. And in a league that's increasingly finding bigger receivers on the outside, when you have a guy that's that long but still that fluid, he totally changes the game for you. His issues are, though, in off coverage, he's not as fluid as Derek Stingley. We talk about one of those things that scouts look for. They look at their ankle flexibility in defensive back. How can you play with all your cleats in the ground and get your cleats in the ground and plant and break on throws? Stingley has a lot better ankle flexibility than Sauce Gardner. Sauce that was about the only issues I really had with him, where he's got some ankle flexibility issues, and that shows up in off coverage. But both those guys are shut down, number 1, true corners. Kyle Hamilton is the next guy in this long line of safeties that we seem to be coming out, where they're huge, they're fast, they're athletic, but he's an extremely smart player, tremendous instincts. He's going to provide tremendous value. Now the question lies, how much value does a safety give you? That's always the discussion with the top picks. I don't think he's as good as Isaiah Simmons was coming out. Now the Cardinals, in my opinion, have misused him. He was not a middle linebacker. He's not a middle linebacker. He's being played out of position. Darwin James, a lot of people make that comparison between Darwin James and Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton isn't quite as twitchy in his lower half, like his ankles, his feet. Darwin's a little twitchier. Kyle Hamilton, though, a little bit bigger than Darwin James. But Kyle Hamilton's a tremendous player and will absolutely change how your secondary plays. All three are really good players, but again, it's where is that value at number 2?
Because right now, I mean, the Lions, in terms of safety, the depth chart, Tracy Walker, who I think had a great season last year, and really, he's a hard hitter, very aggressive player as well. And we've seen him, knock some socks off of some guys, especially in those games that quote unquote didn't matter. And then that Dan Campbell was making his guys play hard. The other guy, strong safety, Deshaun Elliott, who they just got in free agency from Baltimore. And then, some of the other backups, C.J. Moore, Will Harris. I have been wanting to move on from Will Harris since he was drafted from Boston College. I think the front office, is sort of leaning towards getting rid of him as well. The third-round pick from 2019. But just, Kyle Hamilton could be another one of those guys that could add a little bit more with Tracy, I think, in the defensive backfield. But
you mentioned
we'll see.
You mentioned Deshaun Elliott. I think that was one of the better pickups of the entire offseason. I think he was a fantastic player in Baltimore. Baltimore just they chose to upgrade with Marcus Williams. They had the cap space to do it. Good for them. But, I mean, Deshaun Elliott's a fantastic player. I really liked him coming out. I couldn't believe he fell to the 6th round. It's more so just because he's a little undersized for a strong safety skill set. But he's a fantastic player. I think Lions fans are really going to like him this year and like what he brings to the table. And I think that's a guy that he's only on a 1-year deal right now. They might try to keep in the fold moving forward.
They're going to need as much help as they can get for Aaron Glenn's defense and all that. That is for sure. All right, I'm going to move on. Quarterback position. Mm-hmm. This is a pick. This is a guy that I think a lot of people have some question marks about, but he's another guy, a very high-risk, high-reward kind of guy, and there's been some rumblings the Lions might take him. Malik Willis from Liberty. They seem very loyal, at least in the public eye. It seems like they're loyal to Jared Goff, but as we all know, including fans, I don't think the fans and all of them are very confident in Jared Goff and his abilities. I think they still think of him as more of a bridge quarterback for this season, and then maybe next year they'll get someone. But if the Lions end up going with Malik Willis at number 2, definitely a risk type of pick. But the Lions have not had many risk type of picks. They've been gone with a lot of safe picks, but in order to win, it seems like you got to take a little bit of risk sometimes. And I think Malik Willis definitely fits that risk. But what are your thoughts about that, Nate?
So Malik Willis is another very interesting case study of what the NFL has turned into. The league has had tremendous success with these sort of raw quarterbacks with big arms, and they've panned out, it seems like, almost every single one in recent years. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, these guys were not seen as sure things coming out, and they've obviously flourished to maybe the 3 best quarterbacks in football. And Malik Willis has that type of arm. There's no doubt about it. He has a live arm, can make any throw he wants to. The thing with Malik Willis that I think is very different from those guys in a couple aspects, but one of them being, if you look at how big those other quarterbacks are, Josh Allen is 6'6", Justin Herbert's 6'6", Patrick Mahomes is 6'3", even Lamar Jackson is 6'3", but Lamar Jackson's a rocked up 6'3". So if you go down the line, those are bigger, stronger quarterbacks. Malik Willis is 6 foot 220. At 6 foot is not a very big quarterback, and a lot of people over recent years, and starts to go back to the Baker Mayfield draft, are saying quarterback size is an overrated thing. The league needs to evolve. Look at Russell Wilson. Look at Drew Brees. And this is where scouting, you have to try to find what's an anomaly, what's the norm. Russell Wilson is an anomaly, as is Drew Brees. Russell Wilson was 5'11", but he is absolutely jacked up. So he can take a beating at a smaller size. He also is very athletic, as is Malik Willis, where he can move around the pocket, but he knows how to protect himself behind the pocket. Drew Brees, maybe one of the smartest quarterbacks of all time, first of all. Second of all, he got the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. He played in the dome. He played with Sean Payton. None of those other smaller quarterbacks have those advantages to him. You look at Baker Mayfield. He hasn't panned out as an undersized quarterback. Tua Tagovailoa has not panned out as an undersized quarterback. As an undersized quarterback, you have to have something that makes you stand out. Now, Malik Willis has that arm, but his mechanics are horrible. And when you have poor mechanics as a quarterback and when you're taller, Ben Roethlisberger never had good mechanics, but he's 6'5". So when he has bad mechanics, it doesn't matter as much. The ball's not going to sail because he's still throwing on a downward trajectory to his receiver. When you are undersized, your mechanics have to be perfect, because if they aren't, that ball's going to naturally sail high, especially when you stepping up into the pocket when you're throwing vertically. So that's a big thing, is he's a smaller quarterback. So that's a huge risk those other guys didn't have. Also, coming from Liberty, he's played in an offense that, in terms of the reads he had to make, are high school level. Right. It's 1, 2, 3. Matt Corral, we'll talk about him later, has a similar issue of playing in an offense where you're not asked to make these reads. So in terms of the mental aspect of playing quarterback in the NFL, that's not going to be there as a rookie. So there's all types of, and you talk about quarterback age. Justin Herbert was 21 years old. Patrick Mahomes was 21 years old. Malik Willis is already 23 years old. So that clock is already ticking of what his prime windows are going to be. So that's the thing with Malik Willis, where he's a tremendous athlete. He might be one of the best running back quarterbacks in the NFL year one, and he's got the tremendous arm strength. But if you try to put him in an offense that does drop back passes that has to have him read a defense, he's not going to be as successful.
Well, it seems like the Lions, especially last year, were running a lot of play action. They had the offensive line to do it, where I thought this year teams were respecting the run a lot more than they had in the past just because of Jared Goff's play action ability. And really, I think Jared Goff thrives the best in that play action.
No
and
doubt.
We saw him thrive more towards the end of the season after his injuries and once the offense started clicking a little bit more. But I want to know, do you think Malik Willis would be an automatic? So if they were to take him, would Malik Willis be an automatic upgrade from Jared Goff just right off the gate?
It would depend on how he's used. So how the Eagles have – so back to Lamar's rookie year. Lamar's improved as a passer every single year. But in his rookie year, he could not throw football very accurately. I mean, they didn't throw the ball at all. They just ran the ball. The Eagles last year, heavy quarterback run-driven game. And both teams were able to have success with their young quarterbacks, but they put them in an offense that featured their running ability. And really, the offense was built around their mobility. And then, like you said, the play action, what Malik Willis has that those guys didn't have at that point is he has that electric arm to where maybe he hits 1 to 2 bombs a game that change the game. Because that's what everyone in the NFL is looking for, is those big plays. So the Lions would have to commit to an offense that truly utilized Malik Willis's legs. But ideally, if you're taking Malik Willis at 2, he sits behind Jared Goff for next year.
Interesting for sure. All right, I don't want to really talk about offensive tackles. I don't think the Lions have any shot of taking those. I mean, they've already taken Sewell last year. They took Decker a couple years back. I think they're pretty set. On the offensive line, at least at 2. So, Ecom, Ekwonu, and Evan Neal. I think they'll be going to other teams. That's for sure. But I want to talk a little bit more now at what the Lions could do at 32 with the Rams pick that they received in the Matthew Stafford trade. Of course, the Rams won the Super Bowl, so that's why that is the last pick of the first round. I think here the Lions should go either receiver or linebacker. Those are two very prevalent needs that the Lions have. Now, I know the Lions signed DJ Chark in the offseason, basically gave him a 1-year deal as sort of like a tryout to see maybe if he can stick around for that long-term deal in the future. But I definitely think someone to complement Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a phenomenal rookie season for the Lions, and then a little bit of an upgrade. I know they just re-signed Josh Reynolds, but this isn't a guy that's going to be, like a long-time receiver here in Detroit, I don't think. So some of these receivers that I think might fall, Chris Olave, Traylon Burks from Arkansas, Drake London, former teammate at USC with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Any of those guys you think maybe could fit with the Lions, or anyone else that I might be missing from that list as well?
So a general philosophy that I really believe in is that when you get to multiple first-round picks in terms of assets, you should always trade one of them to get more picks for the next year.
Yeah.
Because once you've built up this war chest of draft capital, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to continue that for years going on. So if you move down, you can keep acquiring future picks. And you every single year now, you have some of the most draft picks in the entire NFL draft, and it gives you the ability to go, okay, maybe this is a year that we're going to go up and go get a guy we want, or hey, we're at a good spot, we can trade back down and keep acquiring more picks, and you can do that throughout the entire draft. The Minnesota Vikings have had a lot of success with that over the years. The Baltimore Ravens, the New England Patriots. It's just a way. It's a way of doing business where you always can do what you want to do in the draft, and you don't fall victim to you take a player that you don't necessarily have highly graded, but you're on the board, you're kind of stuck. So I think especially at 32, where we've seen it in recent years, where that's very valuable pick, because that's the last in the first round picks. It's the last pick, and with first round picks, there's a 5th-year option on contracts. That's where the Ravens traded up to get Lamar Jackson. That's a real common spot for teams to go up, get back in the first-round pick, get that 5th-year option. Especially with the Lions picking at 34. I think 32 is a perfect situation to trade down. Whether you get future picks, or you even look at this year's picks, you have 34, you have 66, right? And look at this right now, 34, 66, 97, and then you're not till 177. So maybe you land some more picks in that window. But either way, you're building more picks. You give yourself some more assets when you can still wait 2 more picks and still get the guy you probably wanted at 34. So I think that's really where the Lions should head. But I can still talk into players about that.
It's funny you mentioned all the trading, Nate, because I was actually going to ask you that next to see if maybe the Lions could possibly trade down, because usually, especially with the picks being so far apart, you could get more value. But I will get back to the players in just a second. But I do want to ask, there's been rumblings about the Lions maybe trading 2. Is there a possible situation where you think maybe they would trade down a little bit from 2 because maybe their guy that they really want, they can afford to get a little bit later in the first round?
I think now the problem is, I think teams that want to trade down are going to have a tough time in this year's first round, just because there's not guys worth going up to get. Yeah. That's the big problem. But if they get any calls about 2, and Aiden Hutchinson, we're going to assume Aiden Hutchinson in the situation's off the board, because if he's there at 2, run the card up. I would trade down, because in my opinion, they're probably going edge rusher, and you talk Kayvon Thibodeau, Jermaine Johnson, Trayvon Walker, there's not much separation between those 3. In my opinion, the Lions would be comfortable probably getting any of the 3. So if they can get someone to bite at 2, I absolutely would trade down. Will they? I'm going to guess no. But if they could, I would.
Thank you for saying that, Nate, too, because there's Detroit fans out there that think GMs are so inept when they can't trade down and all that, and especially there's been drafts in the past with the Lions, and how come we didn't trade down with Bob Quinn? But you hit the nail on the head there, Nate. I think that's really the reasons, because there just aren't guys that are that are good enough to move up for. And so I agree with you, Nate, there. I don't think that there's going to be any movement with the Lions at 2, but 32, I definitely could see that for sure. So back to that kind of that second first round pick there. So say the Lions do stay there, or if they trade up, down, whatever for that. These receivers, Olave, Burks, London, I think these are guys that could, really complement Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark and just give another weapon for Goff, because we know when Goff has elite weapons, he thrives, and like he did with the Rams, and he didn't put up the numbers that he did, obviously with the Rams and Sean McVay's system as he did with the Lions, but I think a lot of that just kind of had to do with the lack of talent there at receiver as well.
Yeah, I think that receiver is absolutely the pick at 32 or 34, assuming they move one of the picks. But if they stick, I think receiver has to be the pick. If you look at your depth chart, DJ Chark's a pretty good Z receiver in terms of he can stretch the field. He can give you a jump ball receiver. Amon St. Brown, proven to be a big slot option that can move the sticks, create yards after catch. You're really missing that true number 1 receiver, guy that can separate against anybody type of skill set. And what's awesome about this is you're not going to get the top guys of the Garrett Wilsons of the world. Right. And I actually think there's going to be a huge run of receivers with the NFL. With the NFL's moving, you see all these big receivers getting big-time contracts. It's becoming the second highest paid position behind quarterbacks. So teams might have a higher value on these younger receivers with their rookie contracts, get them for cheap. So I think the back end of the first round, you're going to see a run. But I think the 2 names that I think Lions fans should really look at, assuming Burks, London, Wilson, Olave, those guys go. Yeah. Because based on the Vegas odds, they're all going to be gone. Jahan Dotson and Sky Moore, I think, are the 2 that fit that role and that skill set of what they're looking for, and would be tremendous value picks at that position at that point in the draft. Jahan Dotson shows those true number 1 receiver abilities. He can separate. He's a tremendous route runner, has really reliable hands. He's not great after the catch, but he can make you miss a little bit. He's got a little bit of Deontay Johnson to his game. I know Daniel Jeremiah has made that comparison, and I made that same comparison in my draft guide of that's the guy that I think he could play similar to in terms of a route runner, the hands, being that type of option. And then Sky Moore, I actually grew up playing AAU with Sky Moore. Tremendous
Awesome.
dude. He's an absolute stud. I have him ranked as I think I have my 4th highest ranked receiver, which is going to be a hot take. People love Jameson Williams. They love Olave. Sky Moore is a flat-out dude. He can separate. He's great after the catch. Tough hands, tough player. He can really give you that skill set that you're looking for at a number 1 receiver. Yes, he's a little small, but the dude's a tough football player, flat out knows how to get open. He's going to create yards after the catch. I think he'd be a fantastic pick for the Lions. Either one of those guys would be great picks.
How about any chance of maybe a linebacker? Because the Lions, Alex Anzalone, I know they just re-signed him, the middle linebacker, and they just signed Jared Davis again after drafting him in the first round in 2017.
He does not go away.
Yeah, he does not. No, he, I think the Lions wanted to give him just a second chance, and I talked about it on the podcast before. How, he talked about how Matt Patricia really sucked the life out of him with football, and he went to the Jets for a year, last year, and I just think that he has a lot of skills, for sure, but he was just a little raw, when they drafted him. But I really think now, if he doesn't do anything this year, cut him. But I think he actually, in this case, deserves maybe a second chance, especially with the new culture and what Dan Campbell wants to create. But those are basically the 2 linebackers right now, along with Derek Barnes, who's a little bit more of a special teams player. But I just want to know, we talked about a lot of Georgia guys with Walker and Jordan Davis. Nakobe Dean intrigues me a little bit at the middle linebacker spot. Is he a guy maybe the Lions go, and would he fit that scheme, Aaron Glenn's scheme at all? Or?
Yeah, Nakobe Dean is my number 1 linebacker, but because he did not test and he's undersized, there is a decent chance that he does slip down. I think the linebacking class is really good. There's no superstar linebacker. There's no Devin White in this class. There's obviously no Micah Parsons. He's a one-of-one type of player. But you talk about Nakobe Dean, Christian Harris, Leo Chennault, Quay Walker. I think all of those players would be outstanding picks for the Lions at middle linebacker. Nakobe Dean, on a defense full of studs, popped every time on film because he is clearly the leader. When you can see a guy as a leader on film with his communication, how he's getting guys lined up, that's how you know that guy's a great leader. He's extremely smart. I think he was a scholar athlete at Georgia. Just highly intelligent football player, and it really shows up on film. That dude never misses an assignment. He is perfect on all his blitz tracks. He's a good athlete. Not a great athlete, but he can rush the passer. He's a good run player. But again, we're talking about what you look for in positions. You look for a brain at middle linebacker. For some middle linebacker and safety, those are your quarterbacks of the defense. They got to be highly intelligent players. Nakobe Dean certainly fits that mold. And the other guys, Christian Harris is a weird one because Christian Harris has showed that he could be the best linebacker in this class when he wants to be. Now the problem is Christian Harris, every game except Georgia in the playoff games, he decided he was going to not participate with full effort. So that's a guy that teams got to do their homework on, make sure it was just, maybe it was just I'm only going to get up for the big games type of thing. But Christian Harris is super athletic, smart player, great blitzer. He really would be a great pick. Leo Chennault, probably the best run-stopping linebacker in this draft class. True downhill guy, but he tested out the waters. Now, he didn't show that on film, but his numbers made you take a second look. 9.99 raw athleticism score. I mean, he absolutely tore up the combine. Ran a 4.5 40, jumped 41 inches in the vertical. These are some legit numbers of explosiveness. So he would be a great pick there. And also Quay Walker, another Georgia guy. Now, Quay Walker mentally didn't have the same capabilities of Nakobe Dean, but another absolute freak. Sideline to sideline speed, can cover receivers as a middle linebacker, which is kind of rare. Showed the ability to rush the passer. So, you talk about getting any of those players, I think that's a home run pick for the Lions.
Leo Chennault, former teammate at Wisconsin with Scotty Nelson, 3-year starting safety for the Badgers. We've had him on the podcast before. My former high school teammate at U of D Jesuit as well. All right. we knew we were going to get back to the quarterbacks a little bit. Possibly there late first round, early second round. I've always been of the belief that you have to be a first round quarterback to really make it in this league. There's you talk about the outliers. There's outliers that are in the later rounds, but some of these guys, you just never know. Sam Howell seemed to be like the number one guy last year. He's fallen off as Malik Willis has kind of overtaken him a little bit. Matt Corral from Ole Miss, another guy. Some other reports coming out that he's a party guy and all that this week, but I don't. They said Dan Marino was a party guy. Look where he ended up, Hall of Fame. So, I think these are two guys that are kind of in that mix, late first round, early second round, that maybe the Lions could jump on if they really are looking for a quarterback. Or, what are your thoughts about this, Nate?
Yeah, so that's that conversation of at number 32 of you get that fifth-year option. With that pick. So that's a great spot to take a quarterback. If it's not the Lions taking one, someone else probably going to come and take a quarterback. But I read today, actually, that there's not even quarterbacks being talked about inside the top 20. Steelers pick a 20. They've pretty much forecasted they're taking a quarterback no matter what. But so there might be a guy like a Kenny Pickett or a Ritter to fall to 32. If that case, that would kind of change the conversation for me. But let's assume those guys go. And we're talking about Sam Howell, Matt Corral, and we'll include Ritter in this conversation.
Yeah,
Ritter would be a good pick. Ritter's a solid quarterback. The thing is, with where the Lions are at in their rebuild, he's probably not the best option because Ritter is a guy that is highly intelligent, big-time winner at Cincinnati, totally changed the face of that program. A great leader. He's really athletic, has a pretty good arm. He's just not very accurate, and I don't think he has a high upside. So I think what he projects that as a Alex Smith type of quarterback, a little stronger arm, not as accurate, but that type of quarterback where he's not going to lose you a game, he's going to give you a chance, but at the end of the day, he's always going to leave you wanting more. So where the Lions, if the Lions were a team that was in the playoffs and they just needed a change at quarterback, that'd probably be a better fit. But where the Lions are at in their rebuild, probably not the best fit for them. Sam Howell was the number one guy coming into this year. And a combination of things have happened to him. One, he did not have a good year. He did not play well. Two, he lost some of his stud receivers, which helped him struggle even more. Third, his game is so similar to Baker Mayfield, and the actual Baker Mayfield stunk it up in the NFL. So a lot of people are saying, well, turns out Baker's not that good. Sam Howell is Baker Mayfield Jr. For a lot of scouts, including myself. I was not a Baker fan, so naturally I did not like Sam Howell's game. But if you like Baker Mayfield, you can go get that in Sam Howell. But in terms of Sam Howell's not accurate, he has by far the worst mechanics in the draft out of any of the quarterbacks. And again, like we talked about with Malik Willis, played in an offense that he did not have NFL reads. So he did not have to do anything, maybe throw a bubble, slants, verticals. That was about out of all North Carolina ran with their passing concept. So, again, another guy that you wouldn't expect to play right away. Matt Corral. Matt Corral is an interesting case. I'm not going to talk about the stuff off the field because I am not privileged to that information. Whether that's true or not, all I know is that guy went out there against Baylor, and I know everyone knows he didn't have to, risked himself, got hurt. I guess that shows the kind of teammate he is. That's the kind of stuff you like. But he's an interesting one because he has a quick release. He's pretty accurate and has a pretty good arm. But his release is really funky. He throws it sort of like from where, if you can imagine a shot putter, where a shot putter would push the ball, that's where he throws the ball from. So he runs the risk of having his passes tipped at the line of scrimmage. And again, it's just an unorthodox release that you don't know how that translates to the NFL. And then just like we talked about with Sam Howell, we talked about with Malik Willis, played in an offense that did not have NFL reads. So mentally, is he going to be ready to play? Most likely not. So it is one of those guys worth taking at 32. I would take Desmond Ridder with a 32nd pick if I were most teams. For the Lions situation, I don't think it's the best fit.
Talk with Nate Leopold, four-year player, football player here at John Carroll, also has aspirations of becoming a scout in the National Football League. Nate, I want to know, too, we've talked a lot about the first-round guys. It's hard to kind of scout out some of those late-round guys, but the Lions historically have not really hit on their second-round picks and really some of the later-round picks. Now, most of your NFL team, I think the statistics over 50%, is made up of guys that are those late-round, undrafted free agent guys. So just in general, who are some players that you have in your draft book that are worth looking at in the later rounds that maybe would be specific to the Lions both offensively or defensively?
So one guy who I think would have been an option in the third round for the Lions at linebacker, who's now they could probably steal in the 6th or 7th round, is Damone Clark from LSU. Damone Clark's a fantastic football player. He wore the number 18, so he was chosen as a captain by his teammates, so you know he's a great leader. Checks that box as a middle linebacker. He's athletic, physical in the run game, can rush the passer. The guy, unfortunately, had a spinal fusion surgery that's going to knock him out for his rookie year. So that has really hurt his value. A lot of people project him now in the round 7. But this guy on the field is a round 3 type of player. And for where the Lions are at, we talked a little bit earlier about David Ojabo. These guys that are going to fall a little bit because of an injury. The Lions don't care. They're not. Let's be honest. They're not going to win next year. They're not planning for next year. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, sorry, I almost said Dan Quinn, have 6-year contracts. They're going to be here for the long haul. So they're planning that long rebuild that was needed for the franchise. So you can get a guy that was supposed to be a third-round pick and could end up being the leader of your defense in round 6 or 7. I think that type of player has tremendous value to the Lions, and it fits a position of need where you can then evaluate Gerard Davis, you can evaluate Alex Anzalone. You can survive with those guys this year. And Damone Clark can now learn from 2 vets that have been there, been around. And I think that would be an awesome, awesome player for the Lions late in the draft. And receivers, there's a million guys like every single year. As always.
Dime a dozen.
A guy I think that would be a good fit in later rounds would be Beau Melton. He can play in the slot, can play outside, can just find ways to get the ball in that guy's hands. He can make a lot of plays. He was dynamic. He performed really well at the Senior Bowl. So that's the guy in middle to late rounds from Rutgers who could be a really solid pick, a receiver.
All right, Nate. Before we take off, I want to ask you the $1 million question. If you are Brad Holmes right now, as the Lions general manager, say Aiden Hutchinson goes number 1 to Jacksonville. Just say he's off the board. What do you do at number 2? And what do you do with that 32nd pick as well?
So at 2, I'm going to assume here we're not going to get any takers for a trade. So I'm going to operate under that assumption because, again, like we talked about, I don't think that someone's going to trade up to go get that pick. So it's interesting that you said earlier you don't want the Lions to go tackle and you don't think they should go tackle.
I don't.
If I were Brad Holmes to pick in number 2, I'm taking Akeem Ekwonu.
Wow.
I know this is going to probably upset some of you Lions fans. I talked so much about them needing an edge. But to win in the NFL, you have to create a competitive advantage. Look around the NFL. The Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, they have the most explosive offense. That's a competitive advantage. Look what the Raiders are doing now. Waller, Adams, Renfro. Explosive offense. And then to combine with that, they have 2 nasty pass rushers in Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Competitive advantage. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a chance every single game because of their defensive line of Watt, Tuitt, Hayward. It's a competitive advantage. What's going to make you stick out and force opponents to really respect you? The Lions' best unit right now, by far, on their team is their offensive line. Taylor Decker's a good left tackle. Frank Ragnall's a really good center. Penei Sewell, like we talked about, first-round pick last year, fantastic talent. He's only 21 years old, one of the youngest players in the draft last year. So you have 3, and you talk about Jonah Jackson, who was a guy I really liked out of
Ohio State.
Ohio State a couple years ago. He's a solid player as is. So you really have good foundational pieces, and all these guys are in their 20s, and you could really develop as they keep going. I think if you add Akeem Ekwonu into that mix, you have a true competitive advantage against every team you're going to play. You know when you play the Detroit Lions, you're facing a nasty offensive line. Ekwonu brings that edge to him when he blocks. He's athletic. And what's awesome about him is you can play him at left guard year one, without a doubt. He played left guard at NC State his sophomore year before playing tackle his junior year. And he performed at an extremely high level. And worst case scenario is he stays at guard and becomes an all-pro at guard. But you never know. Taylor Decker has a very expensive contract. He's not going to be here probably for the duration of the contract. Now, that'd be awesome if he did. So at very worst, Taylor Decker leaves, you slide Ekwonu back out. If not, you leave Ekwonu there. Chennault has experience on the left side. He can play left tackle or right tackle. He played both last year. So now if you give yourself Chennault, Akeem Ekwonu, Ragnow, Taylor Decker, that offensive line is nasty and is a competitive advantage right now and for the future. Talk about Dan Campbell wanting to build a new culture. Dan Campbell is a blue-collar type of coach. And you have DeAndre Swift, who's a pretty good back. You're in Detroit. You're a blue-collar, hard-nosed city. Bad boys, Pistons. That's what I think about when I think of Detroit. Now you have that offensive line. You have an identity of who you are. And, in my opinion, you get the second-best player in the draft, so you get great value. So even if he plays left guard to start and then left tackle eventually, even if he stays at left guard, you're getting a stud. You've now created a competitive advantage for whoever your next quarterback is, because Jared Goff's not the long-term solution. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. I'm going to say no. But now, whoever that quarterback is that you're going to drop in, you're dropping him in behind that awesome offensive line. So that's where I would go with number 2.
Oh, man. Nate, I would call that kind of a hot take a little bit there. I was not expecting you to say to say Ekwonu, because remember we skipped over him before. Mm-hmm. I thought there was no shot ever that the Lions would take an O-line, but I do kind of understand your perspective there with that. Jonah Jackson, the 3rd-round pick from 2020, he actually just made his first Pro Bowl this year. He was an alternate.
Oh, he made the Pro Bowl?
He did as an alternate, yes.
Yeah, he was a good player coming out of Ohio State. I really liked him.
And Vaitai is currently the right guard. They got him a big free agent signing a couple years ago. Bob Quinn threw a ton of money at him. Yeah. A guy that had barely ever started with the Eagles, but was playing behind Lane Johnson, one of the best tackles in the game. So I think they kind of thought, well, maybe he learned behind him, and maybe he just wasn't getting his shot because of playing behind Lane Johnson. And he had a very injury-riddled 2020, but 2021, I think he definitely played a lot better. And he played some tackle as well, but when Sewell came back, they slated him on the right side. But oh man, if they take Neal or Ekwonu at number 2, that's going to shake a lot of fans up, I think. And it's going to put a lot of question marks as to where Jonah Jackson or Vaitai fits on this roster.
Well, to me,
especially at guard.
To me, you're not getting rid of Jonah Jackson. You're flipping him over to right. You're asking him to go flip to right guard. Yes, he had a great season at left guard. But with Ekwonu, you can flip him to right guard. He played a little bit of right guard at Ohio State in addition to the left side. So, I mean, that's not something that's uncommon for him. And then, like you talked about with V, now you have an asset where in an offensive line starved league, you can flip him and get more capital for next year. Or at the very worst, now you have a deep offensive line, because the Lions dealt with all kinds of issues injury-wise up front on the offensive line last year. So I know it's not the popular take, but in terms of the value, like I said, I have Ekwonu number 2 overall. And talk about building a competitive advantage that not only fits your coach, your city, creates an identity which the Lions are sorely lacking in this post-Matthew Stafford era. I think they really have to find an identity with who they are, and I think Ekwonu really puts them on a path towards that.
What would you do at 32 now?
So 32, like I said earlier, I would trade down. I would,
okay,
because you're gonna get. I can guarantee you're gonna get an offer for it.
Yeah.
I'm taking my best offer, getting out of there, and 34, I'm still getting the guy I want. So I'm trading 32, accumulating some picks, and I'll make a pick for 34.
Go ahead.
I'm taking Sky Moore if he's there.
Okay.
Like I said, he's not, well. If Burks or London somehow were to fall, run again. Like Aiden Hutchinson situation, run the card up. I don't think that'll be the case. But Sky Moore would be my guy at 34. A true X that can separate, can create yards after catch, has a tremendous work ethic. Again, fits the blue-collar nature, that culture that not Bob Quinn. He's not creating any type of culture that Dan Campbell is trying to create here in Detroit.
This isn't the Patriots anymore, Nate.
No, I think that Sky Moore would be a tremendous fit. And talk about complimenting Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark, who I think has some sticking potential with Detroit. I think that was a really good pickup for the Lions. Talk about those three with TJ Hawkinson, who we haven't even talked about, a Pro Bowl player. That's a really well-rounded receiving core with DeAndre Swift coming out of the backfield. One, you're going to give Jared Goff a legit chance next year. Talk about going Icky and Sky Moore. And then now, next year, if you need a quarterback, if Bryce Young's there for the taking, or C.J. Stroud, or heck, you never know what happens on the quarterback market. Right. You can plop a guy down into a very advantageous situation. Very advantageous situation.
It's interesting that you say that too, Nate, because a lot of people talked about when Dan Campbell first started, it was not a great situation for any quarterback to be in. Or really, most players, they wouldn't want to choose Detroit to come. But if you build that offensive line, it might be more appealing. So maybe they're thinking in terms of the future, plopping those free agent guys. I've talked about it before, how I think the next year or the year after could be a year where they start building that foundation and luring those top talent free agents to come and say, look at the culture we're building. Look at the guys around you that you're going to have. I definitely could see your take now on that, Nate. It's interesting.
Yep, and now that it is interesting, and it's not like what most people are projecting them to do, but you talk about what your offense would currently then be. Take out the quarterback position. DeAndre Swift, true 3-down running back. Later in the draft, they should probably find a complement to him. Jamal Williams is a solid number 2, but I still think another guy would really complement them well, especially now you get Icky, you have that offensive line, you're going to run the football. Running the football is going to give you a chance in every single game. You play in the NFC North. I know the Lions play in a dome, but the rest of the Vikings do as well. But the Bears, again, at the end of the day, the division's going to go through Green Bay for however long Aaron Rodgers decides to play. And you have to go play in cold weather games at Lambeau Field if you're going to win the division, win a playoff game, do anything as a franchise. And building that offensive line up, DeAndre Swift, a really good running game, Sky Moore, TJ Hawkinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark. It's a well-rounded receiving core that really, their skill sets play well off each other. You can go to free agents and say, hey, we have the offense. Defensively, come change that culture on defense. Come be the ones on defense to change what we're going to be. That you saw the Bengals do that. The Bengals went all offense, built their offense through the draft, and then defensively, Mike Hilton. They already had Jesse Bates, but they got Mike Hilton, Trey Hendrickson. They brought Larry Ogunjobi. They brought in the veteran free agents, changed the culture, took them to a Super Bowl. Not saying the Lions could do that, but I mean that's where if I were the Lions, if I were Brad Holmes right now, that's the direction I would go.
It is going to be a very interesting draft, folks, and I'm telling you, Nate's take right there on drafting Ikem Ekwonu at number 2 is probably the only take that you'll hear in Metro Detroit right here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. But I got to say, very unique, and I really enjoy that. And we'll see. Hey, Nate, you're going to be a genius if the Lions take it at number 2. So it's going to be very interesting, of course, 8 o'clock on Thursday in Las Vegas. It's going to be a really, really fun draft. I'm sure with Las Vegas and being sort of the gambling capital of the United States, I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun there as well for the fans. And I'll be definitely watching. I know Nate will as well. He's always been into the draft for a long time, just like me. But Nate, we really appreciate you coming on, and really, really happy you were able to share about your vast knowledge about all these players in the draft this year.
Oh, thanks for having me on. No, I've had an absolute blast. I think the Lions have a really unique situation, so it was a lot of fun to talk about what they could do, what they should do. So thanks for having me on. I really, really enjoyed this.
Oh, Nate, it was my pleasure for sure. And join us next week, folks, for another edition of Open Mic Night as we discuss what the Lions do in this 2022 draft to start year 2 of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes' regime in the Motor City. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next week only on Open Mic Night.